We should try like a normal podcast introduction.
No.
Hi, welcome to Obscurigami, a podcast about a journal of obscure things. I'm your host, Thomas Flay. Ben, is it possible for you to stop laughing long enough to tell me about this podcast?
So while Thomas goes and gets a drink of water, I'll tell you about this podcast. So Obscurigami is an audio journal of the obscure, pointlessly educational in nature. I'm your host, Ben.
And I'm Thomas.
That was Thomas. This topic came to me by way of one of our previous guest hosts.
Oh.
He recommended it to me as a topic just in passing, and I explored it and found it to be fascinating.
To be pleasing to the obscure ear.
Is there a sense
For obscure?
for obscurity? Like that sensation
how
that you
else-
get when you
how else-
find out about something obscure. That's
How
like
else would we know when something's obscure if we
it
didn't
has
have a
that
dedicated
aura
sense?
of exclusiveness to it,
Right.
but also irrelevance. Like the feeling of irrelevance married with the feelings of exclusivity.
What I do is I just assume that I know most stuff, and then anything new that I find out about, I know is obscure. Because if it wasn't, otherwise I would have known about it. That's how I know.
Well, Thomas,
what is this elusive brother guest recommended?
as you look out across this good nation of ours, you will see a lot of different types of terrain, a wide variety, in fact, and you may wonder to yourself, why
Are the Badlands so dang cool?
why aren't there any camels?
In the Badlands, that's a good point.
It's a great question.
Why?
Where are all
The
the camels?
camels.
As a matter of fact, as it just so happens, scientists believe that originally the camel as a species came from the Americas, approximately 50 million years ago. More recently, I jumped ahead. The original camel was...
You jumped ahead to 15 million years ago.
I did, yeah.
What was before that?
So at the 50 million year mark, we had the original camel of the world, which is a rabbit-sized creature called Protolopos.
Oh, interesting.
That
Do we
was the
still have
original
that? Do we still have that today?
camel. We do not have that. That animal is extinct.
That's what they've
Right.
Scientists determined that.
Yes, it went extinct roughly in that era.
Right.
More recently, there was another camel called the...
Wait. That first thing was a camel?
Yes, believed to be the original creature that gave way to all the different species of camels that we have now. So it's sort of like a reverse wolf to dog effect, where you start out with a large animal and it gets bred down into smaller animals.
In this situation, you're starting out with like a corgi, and you're working your way up to a Great Dane.
Or a wolf,
Yeah.
if you will. But another example of the North American camel would be the Camelops.
Are there fossils?
Which went extinct about 12,000 years ago. Yes, there are fossils.
There's
of these.
fossils of these things in North America.
Yes,
Okay,
there
yeah,
are.
That makes sense.
That's how
Right.
we know that camels came from North America.
Right. Or at least how we know that there was a parallel species.
Right, there was a species
in
similar
North
to
America.
camels.
Can camels swim?
Yes.
Good to know.
This animal is called the Camelops.
Well, I was wondering how they got from North America to to the other continents. Tell me about this camel.
They swam
The camel
to Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
The Camelops is an animal that it means camel face, and it was first named in 1854. Ironically, 1 year later was the beginning of the United States Camel Corps project, which was a U.S. military experiment into the use of camels
in the military
in the United States, on United States soil.
Wow.
So the background for this is it started in about the 1830s with this gentleman named George Crossman, who was an Indian fighter. And he was fighting Indians in Florida and Native American peoples. And as he was fighting them, it occurred to him, gee, it would be great if we had some camels around to help us lug our stuff around. Because he saw that mules were very inefficient in his view, and he thought that camels would work great. This idea was floated to a lot of people and started to gain some traction, but its big supporter was a gentleman named Jefferson Davis, who was Secretary of War under President Pierce. And because he was Secretary of War and he championed the idea, that gave it some more clout, which ultimately got it to be put before Congress. And there were all sorts of people, archaeologists and scientists, who backed up this idea, who thought that camels would be great for beasts of burden in the U.S. Army. So they floated before Congress, and it goes before Congress a couple times before it gets passed. And in 1855, Congress appropriates $30,000, which is about $800,000 in today's money, to buy camels and develop a camel task force, if you will.
I have a quick question. So their decision were they fighting Indians in sort of deserts and prairie and that sort of thing where a camel would have been useful?
Definitely.
That they determined. Okay.
Yeah, at that point, the Southwest was still a lot of territories. A lot of the modern states hadn't been divided up the way they are now. So it was still very much a wild west sort of scenario. This is before the Civil War. Yeah. So it was
they may have
very much untamed. This is before there was a transcontinental railway, which comes into play in the camel story later.
And they may have been having challenges with feeding and watering horses over these distances or whatever they were trying to do. Yeah, that makes sense. That's what I assumed. But...
Why he thought of this idea when he was in Florida is still not clear to me.
Right.
What it was about the terrain of Florida that inspired the idea, I don't know. Yeah. It could be that camels have longer legs, and that struck him as useful if you're going through swampier territory down south. And they're also just bigger. Right. So that might be
I don't know. I'm not that versed in the camel versus horse discussion. Maybe camels are just like, if you're not trying to go fast, camels just might be overall better, even if you don't need.
And there is a smaller, faster species of camel called the dromedary. Right. Which is, a leaner, meaner camel, if you will. But Congress appropriates this money, and they put this guy in charge of it.
$800,000 today is not that much money for like a whole.
It's not a crazy amount of money, but it's not. What we're talking about here is not a massive force of camels. We're talking about doing some research, performing some tests. You don't need hundreds of camels. Right. So it's a lot of money to pay for a relatively small gain. Right. Very little gain at all, actually.
Yeah. And I'm also assuming that was probably a larger percentage of the defense military budget than 800,000 would be now. Right. 800,000 is like nothing now. Right. In terms of military spending, but it was probably 15,000, whatever it was then. Right. Was probably a bigger.
Yeah. It seems like a lot to me in proportion to what they were getting.
Right. Well, they were getting some high quality camels.
Well, you hope.
We'll find out. I'll find out. I don't know. So far, this sounds great. I'm all on board. Sign me up.
No, I mean, the men of science of the day were very favorable towards this idea. And there were some independent contractors already who had started companies importing camels. Yeah. Or with the idea of importing camels. Not sure that they actually got to the point where they were importing camels, but there was a business in San Francisco and a business in New York that were incorporated with the idea of importing camels. They put this guy named Major Wayne in charge
a
of,
great name.
isn't it? It rhymes with Major Payne, so should be easy to remember. On this big mission. And he starts out by going to England and France, where he interviews a bunch of experts on camels and camel use in warfare, because in England and France, the use of camels is actually a thing because they can import them from Turkey and that sort of thing. So he interviews all these experts. They tell him, great idea. America, with its rugged terrain, will really find use for these camels. So he goes to Italy, of all places, and he encounters this dude who has some camels that are in really bad shape. So he leaves Italy, starts going to Tunis, where he finds most of his camels. Ultimately, he pays an average purchase price of about $250 each.
Tunis is where I go for all my camel needs.
Right,
so.
that would be the capital of Tunisia.
Right.
On a modern day map.
As we all know.
As everyone knows. And he winds up with 9 dromedaries, 23 load-bearing camels, and 1 calf. He also hires 6 Arabs and 1 camel doctor who recommended a lot of strange cures for various camel diseases. He would recommend, if they got swollen legs, he would give them gunpowder and tea.
Interesting.
And over the course of the voyage back to the United States, he was eventually relieved of his duties as a camel doctor, generally regarded by history to have been a charlatan. So you can only imagine they're sailing back across the Atlantic Ocean,
right,
with 30-some camels on board.
They have a charlatan camel doctor.
Right. The camels are in their mating season, which is actually what they wanted. They wanted to breed as many camels as possible from this hardy stock.
Well, you want a good return on your investment.
Well, of course. So they're trying to breed these camels on ship. One mother does give birth to 2 young calves. However, she dies in the process. So the net gain wasn't really high. He winds up with 1 more camel than he started out with, but that was, he was okay with that.
You're still net gain.
Right. So it takes 3 months, and they get back, and they land in Texas, and they immediately take 3 of the camels on this voyage to San Antonio to test them out and see how they do. And they determined that the camels were equivalent to twice as many mules and a wagon.
Oh, wow.
So those 3 camels were able to haul...
6 mules.
Would have been equivalent to 6 mules and a wagon. Which is pretty good.
Yeah.
One military authority who was tracking with the experiment issued recommendations to Congress that they immediately purchase 1,000 more camels. So clearly they felt like this experiment was a success, and they could do something with it. However, no more camels were purchased. Part of the reason for this is that the camels were very expensive to maintain. One guy estimated about $500 a month.
For all those
in
camels
1856
or per
money.
Camels?
For all the camels.
Right. Per camel would just be crazy.
Right.
But even then.
Yeah. They literally hired and imported specialists from Arabia to take care of them.
Yeah.
And
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. And
especially when you can probably get 6 mules and a wagon
a lot cheaper than a camel.
And you don't need a specialist for those things.
General Babbitt of California believed that the camels that were brought to him were inexpedient in comparison to using native animals. So I guess the practicality of getting the camels there proved to be a deal breaker for him. And also politically, what killed the camel program was Jefferson Davis, the Secretary of War, who okayed and championed the project, left the United States of America to become the president of the Confederacy.
Right.
A
little hiccup there.
Right. So the federal government was eager to distance themselves from
Yeah.
Jefferson Davis.
Can you imagine if he had continued his camel research in the Confederate? We might live in an entirely different nation.
Yeah, well, that's one of the interesting things about this is that the camel fundamentally is not incompatible with
They weren't
American. Right, they weren't exactly wrong.
Right.
Like you could definitely have a successful unit of camels in the American Southwest.
Yeah. To me, this seems like a failure of the system because they should have just been willing to learn. You know, their reasons were basically, oh, it's expensive to maintain. We have to get a specialist.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. Oh, they're expensive. Well, it's like, learn it. Go study with the specialists. Make your own specialist. Come back. Learn how to breed the camels. Then you've got unlimited camels.
But is it worth the return that you would get is the question.
Yeah.
Also, the nation was about to undergo a pretty expensive war. So the idea of doing, research and development while in the middle of trying to maintain unity of a nation is a little bit far-fetched. I'm sure it didn't cross any of the congressmen's minds to continue furthering research into, camels. But the units weren't really dissolved until 1870. That's when the last camel driver was laid off. That's kind of where the story ends. There had been some experiences. There had been some experiments beforehand with bringing camels to the Americas. Some Spaniards tried to bring camels to Peru, which has their own sort of camel-like creatures, the llamas and alpacas of South America. That didn't really fly, didn't really succeed. There was an attempt to bring camels to Jamaica at one point, but they got an infection in their feet. Some insects were troubling their camel hooves. So yeah, the camel has never really taken off. There was all the animals that the United States brought over were eventually sold at auction. And in theory, there's some wild ones that can be seen. Haven't seen any evidence of it. In the plains of the West.
Can you imagine if camels had taken off in America the way the horse did when it was introduced? It could have changed history.
Very much so. Especially if you were a camel.
Especially for the camels. Wow, that's super interesting. I never would have guessed.
It's an unusual little thing.
I think they should give it another go. I guess they don't really need pack animals anymore.
Yeah, see, at this point in history, it's kind of like you can't go back.
The camel cavalry is no longer a necessary...
Unless you were trying to, if the enemy had some sort of technology tracking capability.
Well, here's the thing. At this point, we need backup systems,
Right.
When all our electronics go down, when Russia fires a huge EMP, we have no gasoline, we have no solar technology. You need a way to get around. The lowly horse
isn't enough.
The lowly horse the solution? I think not. We need a camel program for redundancy to roll out as backup. This is why in 2020 I will be running for town council
on a camel platform.
On a camel platform.
I think it's a great idea.
So,
I think it would definitely help, the fledgling economy of our fair city.
Right. Yeah.
It would definitely be a boost to, economics and tourism.
Create some jobs for some camels.
Plus, a camel can haul 1,200 pounds.
That's a lot of pounds.
That's a lot of pounds.
If they had 2 camels, they could have hauled that chain from last episode up that mountain.
Who knows how many mules it took?
Yeah, I'm sure it took a lot.
I mean, I don't even want to think about all those mules.
Who needs mules in a wagon when you can get a camel? You know what I mean?
Mules on wheels. Well, sir, we have come once again to the Random Wikipedia Article segment of the program.
It feels like so long since
I've got the button
we've done this.
Poised right here.
You're poised over the button.
Here we go. I'm going to press the button. Okay. What I have here is The Games Machine. The Games Machine was a video game magazine that was published from 1987 to 1990, so not very long, in the UK by Newsfield, which also published Crash, Zap, 64, Amtix, and other magazines. I'm assuming those are all
Also
computer game related. Yeah. Was edited by Gary Penn and Graham Kidd. Bi-monthly magazine. It looks like it was folded into another title called Raise.
A magazine with the same name is still being published in Italy. While it started as an Italian translated version of the British magazine, it currently publishes original articles and is one of the best-selling PC games magazines in Italy.
That's weird.
Reporting wherever technology is applied to entertainment. The Games Machine, computer and electronic entertainment. For perspective, the game consoles that would have been popular at the time would have been the Mega Drive, which I haven't heard of, and like the NES and Master System.
Ever rising consoles, like Mega Drive.
Well, that was pretty pronounceable, I would say.
That was.
On a pronounceability scale, I'd rank it as a 9.
I have a confession to make. I actually hit the button twice. I hit it early. And when I hit it early, it was a city in Poland, which would have been completely unpronounceable.
Well, we got to give ourselves a little bit of a break after that last one.
I think so.
After last episodes. These things don't come out on a remotely weekly basis.
No, that's true.
Nor was it recorded a week ago. After last episode's Random Wikipedia article,
right.
We needed something a little more palatable.
Indeed.
Well, we've come near the end of another fantastic journey into the land of Obscuria.
Ooh, I like that. Should change the name of the podcast.
Yeah.
Is it too late? Have the t-shirts all been printed?
No, we haven't. We have printed the tickets, though, for the Obscurigami World
I did
Tour
get that
cruise.
Right. I did get that lower back tattoo.
We did get the cruise ship with the Obscurigami wrap.
Yeah, that wasn't... That's
worry.
Peanuts
Your
compared
Patreon
to...
money is going to a good cause.
Thomas, if people want to know more about this show, where can they go to find
They
that
should
out?
go to obscurigami.com. Check out the show notes, curated for you by Ben, and listen to other episodes if you haven't. Subscribe. Look up the podcast in your pod players.
Also, check out our brand of candy available at your local greengrocer, Obscurigummies.
Pick up a bag today. Organic hemp gummies. To the DEA, it's legal non-marijuana hemp. Don't come break down our doors. We do not sell. Obscurigummies is a parody brand of gummies, not a medicinal marijuana product.
But if you want some, I know where you can get it.
If you have any thoughts about camels, you can think of other countries in which camels would be great to use.
Or merchandising ideas.
Or other merchandising ideas, you can shoot us an email. Obscuriguri.com. info@obscurigami.com.
I feel like we're perfectly poised right now to record an audio commentary. I feel like we're in the right mindset.
Oh yeah, to
just totally butcher.
Put on a movie. What movie? If we were gonna do like an audio commentary, what would we do? What's a movie that we would both have like a
foreknowledge
the
of?
sum total of us would have.
You talking about like you and me or this podcast? Or both?
We are this podcast.
Oh, right. We could do... A good one for us would be Battle Beyond the Stars. That Roger Corman movie that we watched back in the day.
I don't remember watching that.
It's the sci-fi remake of The Magnificent Seven.
I don't think I watched that.
Oh, yeah, you did. For sure. Chris was there and Sutton was there.
We watched it at the Norfolk House?
No, at Boonesboro. This was before the Norvell House.
Oh. Wow.
back in the day. Yeah.
I really
If
don't remember
if
that.
we watch the trailer,
I would probably, it would probably trigger my
or if we play the scream,
memories.
you'll remember the scream for sure.
So sleepy. Not really though.